Two siblings from a small harbor town in Massachusetts vanished in 1985 while playing outside with their radio flyer wagon. Police searched for months, but the girls seemed to have disappeared into thin air on that summer day. Then, 15 years later, a fisherman pulls something shocking from the depths of the ocean, a haunting clue that would finally break open the cold case and shatter a mother's world. The morning sun cast long shadows across the weathered floorboards of Maureen Mercer's kitchen in Rockport, Massachusetts. The small coastal town, nestled in Essex County, had been her home for over 30 years. Its harbors filled with fishing boats, the bustling fish markets, and the tight-knit community had once brought her comfort. Now, 15 years after that terrible day in 1985, the town felt more like a prison of memories. Maureen, 46, stood at the sink, mechanically washing the same coffee cup for the third time, her mind elsewhere, as it often was these mornings. The knock at the door startled her from her reverie. Through the kitchen window, she caught sight of a police cruiser parked outside, its presence sending an immediate chill through her body. Her hands trembled as she dried them on a dish towel and made her way to the door. Two officers stood on her porch, their expressions serious but not unkind. The taller one, Officer Brennan, she recognized from around town. "Mrs. Mercer," Officer Brennan began, removing his cap. "We need you to come with us to Granite Cove Harbor. There's been a development in your daughter's case." Maureen's heart lurched. What kind of development? "A fisherman pulled something from the water this morning," the second officer explained. "We believe it's connected to Lila and Daisy." The names of her twins still pierced her heart like shards of glass. Without a word, Maureen grabbed her jacket from the hook by the door, not bothering to change out of her house dress and cardigan. She followed the officers to their patrol car, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. The 10-minute drive to Granite Cove Harbor felt both endless and too brief. Maureen pressed her face against the cool window, watching familiar streets blur past. When they arrived, the harbor was already bustling with activity. Several police vehicles were parked near the docks, and she could see forensics personnel in their distinctive jackets moving about with purpose. Detective James Morrison stood near the water's edge, his graying hair ruffled by the salt breeze. He'd handled her case from the beginning, had become almost a friend through those dark early days. Beside him stood a weathered fisherman in rubber boots and a thick cable-knit sweater, and between them, on a blue tarp, sat something that made Maureen's breath catch in her throat. The red radio flyer wagon, even corroded by 15 years in the ocean, even barnacle-encrusted and missing one wheel, she knew it instantly. Her legs nearly gave out as she approached. "Mrs. Mercer," Detective Morrison said gently, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. "This is Tommy Caldwell. He's the one who found it." Tommy Caldwell looked to be in his 50s, with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He shifted uncomfortably, clearly unused to being at the center of such attention. "Ma'am," Tommy began, his thick Massachusetts accent familiar and comforting. "I was trying out some deeper waters this morning. Fish have been scarce in my usual spots lately, what with the warming waters and all. When I pulled up my nets out near Devil's Drop, there was all manner of trash tangled up in them. And then I saw this." He gestured to the wagon. "I remembered them flyers from back when your girls went missing. That wagon was in all the pictures. Soon as I saw it, I called the police." Maureen found her voice. "Devil's Drop? But nobody fishes there. If it's been out there all this time, why hasn't anyone found it before?" Tommy rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, ma'am, Devil's Drop has a reputation. Jagged rocks underneath, currents that'll turn your boat around before you know it. Lost a trawler out there in '78, the Mary Catherine. 3 men barely made it out alive. Most fishermen won't go near it. Call it superstition if you want, but the sea keeps some places for herself." "Did you find anything else?" Maureen's voice cracked. "The girls? Their bodies?" Detective Morrison shook his head. "Not yet. We've already sent divers down to search the area thoroughly. If there's anything else down there, we'll find it." Moren crouched beside the wagon, her fingers hovering over its rugged surface. Despite the damage, she could still make out the familiar scratch along one side where Daisy had dragged it against the garage door, and there, barely visible beneath the accumulated grime, were traces of purple, remnants of the nail polish Lila had used in her attempt to redecorate the wagon just days before they disappeared. "This is definitely theirs," she whispered to Morrison. "See this scratch? And Lila tried to paint it purple with my nail polish. She was always trying to make things prettier." Morrison nodded, making notes. "Mrs. Mercer, I need you to come to the station. We'll need to document everything you've told us and review the case files. This is no longer just a missing persons case. The wagon being found this far out at sea, someone with a boat was involved. This is now a criminal investigation, possibly abduction." Tommy Caldwell cleared his throat. "What about me, Detective?" "We've recorded your statement, Mr. Caldwell. Just need you to sign some paperwork and leave your contact information. We'll reach out if we need anything else." As Tommy signed the forms, Moren turned to him. "Thank you. Thank you for not just throwing it back, for remembering." The fisherman's weathered face softened. "I got grandkids of my own, ma'am. I'll be at home or at my boathouse today if you need to find me. The police have my address." They left for the station then, Moren in the back of the patrol car, her mind reeling. The familiar streets of Rockport passed by once more, but everything felt different now. For 15 years, she'd lived in a horrible limbo of not knowing. Now, with the discovery of the wagon, that limbo was shifting into something else, something that might finally bring answers, however terrible they might be. At the station, Morrison led her to his office, the same room where she'd spent countless hours in 1985, going over every detail, every possibility. The walls still bore the same faded paint, the same water stain in the corner ceiling. But now there was a computer on his desk, a bulky beige monitor and tower that hadn't been there during the original investigation. "Let's go through this again," Morrison said gently, pulling out the old case file. It was thick, worn at the edges from handling. 15 years ago, August 12, 1985. Your daughters, Lila and Daisy, 8 years old, were playing outside with their radio flyer wagon. Moren nodded, the familiar recitation both painful and necessary. "They did it often. The park was just across the road and around the corner from our house. We didn't have much of a backyard, so I let them play there. It was safe. Rockport was safe. Everyone knew everyone. They were supposed to be home by 5:30 p.m. Yes, when they didn't come home, I went looking. First the park, then the fish market where I had my stall. I asked everyone, had they seen the girls? But no one had. I checked the stores we visited as a family. Nothing." Morrison flipped through the pages. "We interviewed everyone in your neighborhood, checked every gas station, contacted the harbor authority. No one reported seeing anything suspicious." "It didn't make sense," Moren said, her voice tight with the old frustration. "Rockport had one of the lowest crime rates in the state. We didn't have trafficking. We didn't have those kinds of criminals. And now, finding the wagon so far out at sea." "Whoever did this had access to a boat," Morrison concluded. "That narrows it down considerably. Someone in the fishing or harbor community knows something." He leaned back in his chair. "We're going to alert the community again, re-interview everyone, especially those who owned or operated boats in 1985. "I want to see Tommy Caldwell again," Moren said suddenly. "To thank him properly. I promised him I would." Morrison nodded and wrote down Tommy's address on a piece of station letterhead. "Do you have a cell phone, Mrs. Mercer?" Number I never saw the need. The detective opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small Nokia phone, the kind with the tiny screen and rubber buttons. "Take this. It's a spare. The number's taped on the back. Keep it with you. We're actively working this case now, and I need to be able to reach you when you're not home." Maureen took the phone, its weight unfamiliar in her hand. Technology had marched on while she'd stood still, frozen in 1985. After signing some paperwork, consent forms, evidence documentation, Morrison offered to have an officer drive her home. She accepted, suddenly exhausted, despite it being barely noon. As the patrol car pulled up to her house, Maureen clutched the Nokia phone and the paper with Tommy's address. For 15 years, she'd had nothing but questions and old photographs. Now she had the red wagon and a new thread to follow. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had yesterday. The officer waited until she was safely inside before driving away. Maureen stood in her doorway for a moment, looking out at the quiet street where her daughters had once played. She went upstairs to change her clothes, then walked out of the house and got into her car to head to Tommy's address. Maureen's old Honda Civic pulled up to the address Detective Morrison had given her. Tommy Caldwell's property sat on a quiet stretch near the water, away from the main harbor bustle. A modest two-story house with weathered cedar shingles stood beside a boathouse that had seen better days. She could see Tommy outside, a pressure washer in hand, blasting years of grime from the boathouse's exterior walls. He noticed her arrival and shut off the machine, raising a hand in greeting as she stepped out of her car. The sudden silence was filled by the cry of gulls and the distant sound of boat engines. "Mrs. Mercer," Tommy said, wiping his hands on his already damp jeans. "Didn't expect to see you so soon." "Please call me Maureen," she said, approaching him. "I wanted to thank you properly, away from all the police and commotion." Tommy gestured to a pair of old lawn chairs near the boathouse. "Can I get you something? Coffee? Water?" "No, thank you. I won't take up much of your time." They sat down, and Maureen looked out at the harbor view, partially visible between neighboring buildings. "I haven't been around the harbor much these past 15 years, she admitted. "After the girls disappeared, I couldn't bear it. Too many memories." Tommy nodded, understanding in his weathered face. "Can't imagine how hard that must have been." "Tell me," Maureen said, shifting in the creaky chair, "how has the fishing community changed?" "In 15 years, things must be different." "Oh, plenty's changed," Tommy said, settling back. "Lost a lot of the old-timers. Retirement, some passed on. Young folks don't want to fish like their fathers did. They go to college, get office jobs in Boston. Can't say I blame them. It's hard work for uncertain pay." "And whoever took my girls to that spot, to Devil's Drop, they would have needed a boat," Maureen said carefully. "Someone from the community." Tommy's expression darkened. "Been thinking about that myself. Back in '85, there were maybe 60, 70 boats working out of Rockport regular. Now we're down to half that. Whoever did this, they knew these waters. Knew Devil's Drop was a place nobody'd look." The conversation drifted, and Maureen found herself asking, "Did you know my stall at the fish market? Mercer's Fresh Catch?" Tommy's face brightened slightly. "Course I did. You had the spot right at the corner, caught everyone coming in. Always a crowd there, especially summer weekends with the tourists. Best location in the market." "What happened to that spot after I closed?" "Well, now, let me think." Tommy scratched his chin. "For a while it sat empty. Market wasn't the same without your stall there. Then Frank DeWitt took it over. He's done well for himself there." "Frank?" Maureen's brow furrowed. "But Frank had his own stall back then. I remember because—" She paused, the memory surfacing clearly. "His business was struggling. I felt terrible for him, all that fresh fish and barely any customers. I once bought his entire stock just to help him out." Tommy chuckled. "That sounds like something you'd do." "He didn't appreciate it," Maureen continued. "The second time I tried, he got offended. Told me to mind my own stall and stop pitying him. He was always prideful like that." "I work out on the water mostly," Tommy said. "Don't get to the market much except to drop off my catch. But I heard the stories. Frank did close up shop for a while after your girls. But when he came back and took your old spot, business turned around for him. That corner location really is magic. Blessed two owners now." "Good for him," Maureen said, though something nagged at her. "His hard work finally paid off. Maybe I should visit the market, talk to him. It's been so long since I've seen any of the old crowd." "You should," Tommy encouraged. "Might do you good to reconnect." Maureen opened her purse and pulled out her wallet. "Now, let me give you something for your trouble today. A reward for finding—" "Absolutely not," Tommy said firmly, holding up both hands. "I didn't pull that wagon up looking for any reward." "Please," Maureen insisted, pulling out several bills. "This is nothing compared to what you've done for me. You've given me hope for the first time in 15 years. But Tommy was already standing, shaking his head. "Ma'am, Maureen, I got grandkids, like I said. If it was them, I'd want someone to do the same. You keep your money." Seeing she wouldn't win this argument, Maureen tucked the money away, but pulled out a small notepad instead. "At least let me give you my information. If you ever need anything at all, you call me." She wrote down her home phone number and address in careful script, tore off the page, and handed it to him. Tommy accepted the paper, folding it carefully and placing it in his shirt pocket. "I appreciate that." "I should let you get back to your cleaning," Maureen said, standing. Tommy walked her back to her car, the gravel crunching under their feet. "You take care now," he said as she got in. "And Maureen? I hope they find answers for you. 15 years is too long to wonder." As she drove away, Maureen glanced in her rearview mirror to see Tommy standing there, watching her go, the paper with her information still in his hand. She'd lived in Rockport all her life, but in her grief, she'd forgotten about the simple kindness of people like Tommy Caldwell. It was a small comfort, but on a day when her worst fears were beginning to take shape, she'd take whatever comfort she could find. The Rockport Fish Market sat just 3 blocks from the harbor, its distinctive smell of salt and fresh catch reaching Maureen before she even rounded the corner. For 15 years, she'd driven the extra 20 minutes to Shaw's Supermarket in Gloucester rather than face this place. The fish there was never as fresh, wrapped in plastic on foam trays, but it didn't come with pitying looks or whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. Now, standing at the market's entrance, she forced herself to step inside. The layout hadn't changed much. The same concrete floors sloped toward drains, the same ice-filled display cases, the same hand-painted signs advertising the day's catch. But the faces were different, younger, unfamiliar. Her old corner spot was indeed Frank's stall now, a professional-looking sign replacing her hand-painted one. The display was well organized, gleaming fish arranged on fresh ice, but Frank himself was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a young man in his 20s stood behind the counter, wrapping up an order for a customer. Maureen waited until he was free, then approached. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Frank DeWitt." The young man glanced up. "Mr. DeWitt's at the auction house. Should be finishing up about now, if you want to catch him there." "The auction house?" "Yeah, just 3 blocks down, the big gray building. Can't miss it." Maureen thanked him and left, her footsteps quick on the familiar streets. The auction house was indeed impossible to miss, a large, weathered building that had been serving Rockport's fishing fleet since the 1920s. As she approached, she noticed how quiet it was. The morning auction would be long over, most of the fishermen already heading back out to sea or home to rest. She was about to enter through the main doors when she heard raised voices from the side of the building. Instinctively, she stopped, pressing herself against the wall. "Told you I'd have your cash by the end of the week?" It was Frank's voice, rougher than she remembered, but unmistakable. Before late, Frank, that was the deal. The other voice belonged to a man in a stained apron, possibly from one of the processing facilities. "This is fisherman business," Frank snapped. "No time for doubt now. We agreed." The man in the apron shook his head and started walking away. Frank followed, his boots heavy on the asphalt. They stopped beside a beaten pickup truck where the aproned man reached through the open window and grabbed something. He dangled a key in the air, the afternoon sun glinting off the metal. Frank snatched it aggressively, his movement sharp and angry. "You'll get your money," Frank said, his tone nasty. The man said nothing, just climbed into his truck. Frank pocketed the key and turned away without another word, heading back toward the market. Moren waited until she heard the truck's engine roar to life and watched it disappear down the road, leaving her alone with her racing thoughts. Frank was probably talking about something related to today's auction. Moren watched Frank's bulky figure stride back toward the fish market, his gait still carrying that characteristic fisherman's role even after all these years. She followed at a distance, giving herself time to compose her thoughts. Whatever that exchange with the aproned man had been about, it wasn't her business. Frank had always been a difficult man, prone to sharp words and sharper moods. When she entered the market again, Frank was already behind his stall, barking orders at his young employee. He glanced up as she approached, and his weathered face showed no pleasure at the sight of her. "Well, well," Frank said, his voice gravelly from decades of salt air and cigarettes. "After a decade, finally you show your face here again. People starting to think you're dead." The words stung, but Moren knew Frank's way. Life had carved deep lines into his face, turned his mouth into a permanent scowl. The fishing life was hard on everyone, but it had been particularly unkind to Frank DeWitt. "Hello, Frank," she said evenly. "I heard you took over my old spot." "Someone had to." He turned to arrange some red snapper on ice, not meeting her eyes. "Now, what are you doing here?" "Actually, I'm here because of what happened this morning," Moren explained. "The police found evidence. A fisherman pulled my daughter's wagon from the sea. That's why I'm back, just looking around to see how this part of town has changed." Frank's hand stilled on the fish. "I heard—" He looked up then, his dark eyes unreadable. "Who was this fisherman who found it?" "Tommy Caldwell." Frank snorted. "Tommy Caldwell? Lucky him for being famous now. Hope he doesn't use his newfound fame to open a stall around here." His mouth twisted into what might have been a smile, but looked more like a grimace. "Market's crowded enough as it is." "I'm happy your stand is doing so well," Moren offered, trying to soften the conversation. "You deserve success after all your hard work." Frank's expression remained cold. "Your stall used to be doing very well. Sadly, you left. This spot right here, it's just lucky." He turned away, reaching under his counter. He grabbed a white styrofoam box and set it on the counter with a thump. Inside, Moren could see fresh fish, pink shrimp, and glistening squid, all nestled in ice. "Frank, no," she protested. "There's no need." "Take it," he cut in gruffly. "I still remember when you cleared out my entire stock back then. Figured I was just some miserable old man, but now we're even. Take it or leave it, but I don't owe anyone a damn thing. That's just the way the world works." Moren was momentarily speechless, unsure whether Frank was offering her a gesture of kindness or simply trying to show off. Still, she chose to give him the benefit of the doubt, trying to see the good in him. She accepted the offer, lifting the surprisingly heavy container. "Thank you, Frank," she said quietly. He waved her off, already turning back to his display. Moren drove home with the styrofoam box on the passenger seat, the gift both touching and unsettling. At her house, she carried it to the back kitchen, a space she'd once used daily when she ran her fish stall. Now it stood neglected, dust motes dancing in the afternoon light, streaming through grimy windows. She opened the old chest freezer, already knowing what she'd find. The motor was silent, the interior warm and musty. 15 years of disuse had killed it. Her refrigerator's small freezer compartment couldn't possibly hold all of Frank's gift. Sighing, Moren transferred the box back to her car. She'd have to take it to the cutting house at the harbor, pay them to clean, and store it. As she backed out of her driveway, she couldn't shake the feeling that there could be something more about Frank DeWitt. The harbor parking lot was busy with the afternoon shift change, fishermen heading out for evening runs while others secured their boats for the night. Moren had just pulled into a space near the cutting house when she spotted a familiar figure in the distance. Tommy Caldwell was walking quickly across the lot, but something was wrong. His shoulders were hunched, his gait agitated, and he carried a black garbage bag at arm's length. She jogged toward him, calling his name. As she got closer, an absolutely foul smell hit her. Rotting fish mixed with something worse. "Tommy! What's wrong?" He turned, his face flushed with anger. "Someone threw this inside my boathouse just now. I was inside organizing my nets when I heard something hit the wall. By the time I got out there, found this bag of God knows what." "Did you see who did it?" Tommy's jaw tightened. "Caught a glimpse of someone walking away. Bald head, that's about all I could make out. When I tried to chase after him, he'd already disappeared. Must have had his car running." "What kind of car?" Moren found herself asking, though she wasn't sure why it mattered. "Ford F-150, late 90s model, dark blue or black. Half the fishermen around here drive something similar." Tommy shifted the reeking bag to his other hand. "But if my one good eye was right, I saw what looked like a sticker just near the license plate." "Sticker? What sticker?" "Can't say exactly what it was. Didn't get a proper look. But if I see it again, I'll know." His voice hardened. "And next time I'll deal with that person for doing this to me." Tommy seemed to shake himself from his anger, noticing the styrofoam box in Moren's hands. "What brings you to the cutting house?" "Frank gave me a box of fresh seafood," she explained. "My freezer's broken at home, has been for years. My fridge alone isn't enough for all this, so I'm having it cleaned and stored here for the week." She lifted the lid slightly. "You should take some. There's no way I can finish this alone, and She paused, the reality hitting her again. "I have no one to share it with." Tommy's expression softened. "That's kind of you, Moren. Tell you what, let me get rid of this foul thing first, then I'll come find you. You said Frank did that? How strange." They parted ways, Tommy heading for the dumpsters while Moren entered the cutting house. The familiar smell of fresh fish and the sound of saws on ice brought back memories she'd tried to bury. Behind the counter stood Mark Patterson, his hair grayer than she remembered, but his smile just as warm. "Moren Mercer," Mark said, genuine pleasure in his voice. "How long has it been?" "Too long," she admitted. "I haven't been around the harbor area much." "It's the grief," she added quietly. "It was easier to stay away." Mark nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I heard about this morning. Police found the girl's toy?" "Their wagon, yes. That's actually why I'm here today, just looking around the harbor." She set the box on the counter. "Frank DeWitt gave me all this, but I need it cleaned and stored. How much for a week's storage?" "No charge," Mark said immediately. "It's the least I can—" "Mark, please." Moren pulled out her wallet. "I've had enough of people giving me free things today. I appreciate the kindness, but I need to pay. I need things to be normal." Mark studied her for a moment, then named a fair price. As Moren counted out the bills, she heard the kitchen door swing open. A man emerged to collect the styrofoam box, and Moren's breath caught. It was the same man from the auction house, the one in the apron who'd given Frank the key. She tried to keep her voice casual as she turned back to Mark. "Excuse me, who was that?" "The man who just took my box?" Mark looked confused by the question. "That's Jesse Vaughn. Is there anything wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong," Moren forced a smile. "I just thought I recognized him. Saw him this morning talking to Frank at the auction house." Mark's expression shifted slightly. "Jesse rarely deals business with Frank. To be honest, I don't really like the guy. Frank, I mean. Nothing personal, but he's just not a pleasant man to talk to." He started to turn toward the kitchen. "I should go talk to Jesse." "No, please," Moren said quickly. It wasn't anything important. Really? Mark paused, then shrugged. All right then. Thanks for letting me know, though. I'll have your fish ready whenever you need it. Moren thanked him and left the cutting house. Outside the cutting house, Moren walked to her car with measured steps, exhaustion finally catching up with her. The day had been an emotional marathon, from the wagon's discovery to seeing old faces, from Tommy's kindness to Frank's unexpected gift. All she wanted now was to go home, make a cup of tea, and process everything that had happened. She started her Honda and pulled out of the parking lot, taking the familiar route home. As she passed the fish market, she couldn't help but glance over. Frank's stall was bustling with late afternoon customers, his young employee working the counter with practiced efficiency. But Frank himself was nowhere to be seen. Again. Moren continued down Harbor Road, reaching over to turn on the radio. The local oldies station was playing Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, and she let the familiar melody wash over her. For just a moment, she could pretend it was a normal day, that she was just another Rockport resident heading home after errands. The illusion shattered when she noticed a car speeding up behind her in the rearview mirror. It swerved around her Honda with reckless abandon, then suddenly pulled over on the shoulder ahead. The driver's door flew open, and a man stepped out, shouting and waving his arms frantically. Moren's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She couldn't make out the man's face clearly. She was too focused on not rear-ending him, but as she checked her mirrors to pull over safely, she recognized him. Jesse Vaughn, the butcher from the cutting house. She reversed carefully until she was parallel with his car, then stepped out. Jesse was already jogging toward her, his face flushed and panicked. "I need to speak with you about something important," Jesse said. "We're in the middle of the road," Moren said, glancing nervously at the passing traffic. "Come to my place and we'll talk." "No!" Jesse's voice cracked. "I need to tell you something important now. Right now." The raw fear in his voice made Moren's stomach clench. "What is it?" "Frank came to see me this morning." Jesse was trembling visibly, his words tumbling out in a rush. "Actually, he's been seeking me out for the last few weeks, but this morning he looked different, more serious, like he was panicking." "Get to the point," Moren urged, her heart beginning to race. Jesse took a shaky breath. "Frank's been asking to use my fishery house for the past 2 weeks, to rent it actually. Said he was going to receive a big stock and needed extra space to store it. But the thing is, he wanted to rent the entire space and have the key. I refused, told him he could store his stuff, but I couldn't give him the key or rent him ownership of the fishery house." "But this morning," Jesse continued, his voice dropping, "he was different. He looked more serious, desperate even. He insisted on renting my boat for 3 days. He wanted the key to my boathouse, too." "Your boat?" Moren's mind raced back to the wagon found at sea. "When I refused him again, he made me an offer. He paid me, God, so much money, and told me he would use my boathouse and the boat to tie up loose ends. Said he needed to get rid of something." Jesse's face had gone pale. "So I insisted he tell me what he was getting rid of." Jesse's voice broke. "He easily showed me a picture of twins. Told me if I told police about this, he'd still kill the women and come for me and my boss, Mark too. But if I kept silent and let him use my boat, then he'd make sure police never found what he did, and I'd be safe." Moren felt the world tilt. "Twins?" Jesse met her eyes, tears threatening to spill. "I believe the girl was one of your daughters. I saw the old flyers, and they looked similar even though the girl was grown up now. I wasn't sure back then, but the more I think about it, the more sure I am. And Mark just told me you received that seafood box from Frank, and you were the mother of the missing twins, so I thought it must be related somehow." "Why are you telling me this now?" Moren's voice had gone deadly quiet. "Why didn't you call the police immediately?" "The money he offered was tempting," Jesse continued miserably. "I could expand my business immediately, help Mark with his debts. I could get rid of the boat after he used it and keep myself safe, so I accepted it. I was so stupid. I shouldn't have—" His voice dropped to a whisper. "I didn't call police because I was scared." The world seemed to stop. Twins? Alive? After 15 years. "Now you've told me," Moren said, her voice sharp with urgency. "You know that you have to tell police, right? You have to help me. Please, show me your boathouse. Where is it? We need to get to police." Okay, Jessie babbled, apologizing over and over. "I'm so sorry. I was stupid and slow. I should have—" "Your apology only means something if we make it there in time before he does something very bad to my daughter, or the girl, whoever it is." With shaking hands, Moren grabbed the Nokia phone from her purse. The little device that Detective Morrison had given her just this morning now felt like a lifeline. She punched in the number he'd provided, her fingers clumsy with urgency. "This is Maureen Mercer," she said when the dispatcher answered. "I need to speak to Detective Morrison immediately. It's about my daughter's case." Within seconds, Morrison was on the line. Maureen forced herself to speak clearly, relaying everything Jessie had told her. Beside her, Jessie provided his boathouse address when prompted, his voice thin with fear. "You'll go to the station and wait there while we send a unit to the address," Morrison instructed. "Please," Maureen's voice broke. "You can't alert Frank, or he'll kill my daughter." "We acknowledge that, Mrs. Mercer. We'll come up with a strategy. No sirens, no marked cars, until we know the situation. Get to the station now, both of you." As Maureen lowered the phone, she looked at Jessie's terrified face and felt a mixture of rage and desperate hope. "Get in the car," she told Jessie, "and pray we're not too late." Jessie nodded, pulling his car into a small lot behind a bait shop. He jogged back to Maureen's Honda and slid into the passenger seat, his hands still shaking. "There's no way I can stay home or sit at the police station like this," Maureen said, gripping the steering wheel. "Show me the way to your boathouse. We can watch from afar, find a spot where we can see what's happening without being seen." "I know a place," Jessie said, pointing ahead. "There's a viewing spot on the opposite side where we can get a clear look without getting caught. Take a left here." They drove in tense silence, Jessie directing her through side streets until they reached a small rise overlooking the harbor. From here, they had a clear view of Jessie's boathouse across the water. Maureen parked behind some scrub bushes, and they both leaned forward, scanning the scene. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. The boathouse stood silent, Jessie's boat still visible inside through the open water entrance. No sign of Frank, no police presence yet. "I don't understand," Jessie whispered. "Is he not here yet, or has he already?" "Frank didn't tell you what time?" Maureen asked, though she dreaded the answer. "No, just that he needed it for 3 days starting today." Maureen grabbed the Nokia phone and called the station. "We're at the viewing point. The boathouse looks empty. No sign of Frank or any activity." Detective Morrison's voice was calm but urgent. "We're sending multiple teams to search for Frank and to stake out the boathouse. Stay where you are." "I met him just a few hours ago," Maureen said, thinking aloud. "There's no way he could pull off his plan in that time." Within minutes, they saw unmarked police cars converging on the boathouse from different directions. Officers in plain clothes took positions, some entering the structure, while others established a perimeter. The operation was swift and professional. Maureen and Jessie returned to their car, maintaining their distance from the police activity. The late afternoon sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Then Maureen saw it, a dark blue Ford F-150 driving past on the access road below them. The sticker. There it was, next to the license plate, just as Tommy had described. A faded Marine Corps decal. And the driver. She could see his profile through the side window, bald head catching the dying light. "That's him," she breathed. "That's Frank's truck, the same one Tommy saw." Without thinking, she started the engine and began following at a distance. Jessie fumbled with the phone, keeping the line open with police dispatch. He's heading north on Harbor Access Road, Jessie reported. Wait, he's turning... Oh, God, he's not going to my boathouse. He's heading to my fishery house. Your fishery house? Morrison's voice crackled through the phone. It's new, been open less than a year. It's at the old Brennan fishery site, Jessie explained rapidly. He must have decided to use that instead. Does he have keys to the fishery house? Yes, Jessie's voice was miserable. He took my whole key ring. Listen carefully, Morrison said. Do not approach. We can't stop him on the road. If he has the girl and a weapon, cornering him could trigger violence. We need tactical advantage. Go back to the station now. No, Maureen said firmly. We'll watch from a distance. I need to see this. Morrison started to protest, but Maureen had already turned off the main road, following a service path that led to higher ground above the old fishery. She parked behind a stand of pine trees, the car hidden but with a clear view of the fishery house below. They got out quietly, Maureen crouching behind the vegetation. Through the gathering dusk, they watched Frank's truck pull up to the fishery house. He got out, looked around carefully, then went to the passenger side. Maureen's heart stopped as she watched him pull out a limp female form. Even from this distance, even after 15 years, a mother knows. The way the woman's hair fell, the shape of her face in profile. It was one of her girls, grown up but unmistakable. Frank carried her inside after fumbling with the keys. Moments later, he emerged again, retrieving a coil of rope and a toolbox from his truck bed. Oh, God, Jessie whispered. He's going to... Shh, Maureen hissed, though her own heart pounded in her chest. Only one of the twins was there. Where was the other? In the distance, she could see police vehicles approaching with their lights off, moving like shadows in the failing light. They positioned themselves strategically, surrounding the building. She counted at least 6 officers moving into position. The raid, when it came, was swift and precise. Officers breached multiple entrances simultaneously. There was shouting, Frank's voice angry and surprised, but no gunshots. Minutes later, they led him out in handcuffs, his bald head bowed, shoulders slumped in defeat. Maureen's phone rang, Morrison's voice. We got him. He's secured. But Mrs. Mercer, we need you and Jessie here now. Your daughter is scared and asking for you. Maureen was already running back to the car, Jessie close behind. They drove down to the fishery house, abandoning all pretense of hiding. Police waved them through the perimeter. Inside, the fishery house was eerily quiet after the chaos. Industrial refrigeration units hummed in the background. Police photographers were documenting everything. Frank's tools laid out on a stainless steel table, his guns, personal items. And there, on a concrete slab in the center of the room, lay a young woman. Above her, a rope hung from the ceiling beam, partially knotted. Frank had been in the middle of his preparations when police stormed in. Maureen approached slowly, her legs trembling. The woman, barely more than a girl despite being 23, was stirring as an officer gently shook her shoulder. Miss, can you hear me? You're safe now. The girl's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. She looked at the officers, at the fishery house, and finally at Maureen. No recognition in those familiar eyes. Who are you? The girl asked weakly. Why are police here? Where's Frank? Maureen knelt beside her, tears streaming down her face. This is Mom. I'm your mom. Police caught Frank. This man, Jessie. He helped us find you. The girl shook her head, fresh tears spilling. My mother's dead. Frank said? He said she died. No, sweetheart, I'm alive. I've been looking for you every single day for 15 years. The girl studied Maureen's face, confusion giving way to something else. He lied to us, she whispered. Frank lied about everything, and he killed her. Frank killed Daisy. The name hit Maureen like a physical blow. This was Lila, her younger twin by 12 minutes. And Daisy. Oh, Lila, Maureen sobbed, gathering her daughter into her arms. "You are my mom?" Lila asked, wonder in her voice. "You look so old, I barely recognize you." Maureen laughed through her tears. "That must be from all the years looking for you and thinking about you and Daisy." "Daisy's been gone for a long time," Lila said, her voice breaking. She tried to say more, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. "It's okay," Maureen soothed. "No need to rush. What's important is we're together now, and alive, and Frank's been arrested." Lila turned to Jesse, who stood awkwardly nearby. "You helped find me?" Jesse nodded, tears in his own eyes. "We all saved each other. If I hadn't spoken up, I'd be in trouble for having that," he gestured at the rope setup, "in my property. I never could have lived with the guilt and regret if I'd stayed quiet." Suddenly Jesse wrinkled his nose. "Do you smell that?" He walked toward the back of the fishery house with an officer. "The incinerator. It's on." They found it glowing red-hot in a back room. The officer examined it grimly. He was preparing to dispose of evidence, or ... "He asked me for the boat first," Jesse said quietly. "I thought he planned to dump her at sea, but maybe with all the police activity at the harbor today, the divers searching, he changed his plan." Lila clung to Maureen, sobbing. The medical team arrived then, gently extracting them from their embrace to examine Lila. "He gave me cough medicine," Lila told them. "Much more than my usual dose. He forced me to take it." "He wanted you sedated for transport, but conscious for—" The officer trailed off. "You're safe now." The medical team was thorough but gentle, checking for injuries new and old. They documented everything Lila told them about the abuse she'd suffered, their faces professionally neutral but kind. "She should have a full examination at the hospital," the lead paramedic said. "But she's not in immediate medical danger." Detective Morrison approached. "If you're both able, I'd like to take your statements at the station while everything's still fresh. Then we'll get Lila to the hospital." They helped Lila to the police car, Maureen never letting go of her hand. Jesse followed in another vehicle, his part in this story not yet over. As they drove away from the fishery house, Maureen held her daughter close. 15 years of separation finally ended, even as the horrible truth of what had happened began to emerge. The Rockport police station hummed with activity as they arrived. Officers moved with purpose through the corridors, phones rang constantly, and hushed conversations filled the air. Maureen caught fragments as they passed, an officer handing a file to Detective Morrison saying, "Frank's talking, but he might still be hiding some things." She exchanged a worried glance with Jesse, who looked pale and frightened as officers led him toward a separate interview room. Lila was taken to another room with a female officer, leaving Maureen to follow Detective Morrison into a small, windowless space with a metal table and 2 chairs. "Let's start from the beginning," Morrison said gently, pulling out a digital recorder. "Tell me everything that happened today." Maureen recounted it all, finding the wagon, visiting Tommy, Frank's gift, the cutting house, Jesse's frantic confession on the roadside, the race to save her daughter. Morrison took notes, occasionally asking for clarification, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. When she finished, he opened the file that had been handed to him in the corridor. He read through it silently, his jaw tightening, then looked up at her. "Frank's confessing," he said quietly. "I need to share this with you, but it's going to be difficult to hear." Maureen steeled herself. "I need to know." Morrison began reading from Frank's statement. "On August 12, 1985, your daughters Lila and Daisy Mercer were playing in the local park with their red radio flyer wagon." "Yes," Maureen confirmed, her voice barely a whisper. "The park was so close, just across the road and around the corner. I always let them play there unsupervised. It was such a safe, close-knit community. Everyone knew everyone. Frank says he approached them with a promise of vanilla slices from the cafe near the harbor, told them they were going fishing together, that he had your permission, said they'd catch fish for dinner and make you proud. Maureen's hands clenched in her lap as Morrison continued. Instead of the cafe, he drove them to his house. He sedated both girls and wrapped them in a tarpaulin with his fishing gear. He hid them in the locked cabin of his trawler and began moving them from place to place. The detective's voice grew harder. He had a network, other fishermen at different harbors along the coast. He would lend the girls to these men for days at a time in exchange for their silence. This went on while the investigation was hot. Maureen felt bile rise in her throat. All those people? They all knew? After the investigation cooled, he moved them to his basement. He gave them small amounts of money daily, told them if they were good and quiet, they could save enough to leave someday. He convinced them you and your husband had moved to another state and died in a plane crash, bodies never recovered. Did they never try to escape? Maureen asked, though she dreaded the answer. Morrison's face was grim as he consulted the notes. Daisy did, when she was 14. He paused, clearly struggling with the next part. Frank caught her trying to leave. During an assault, he cut her throat. Then Morrison's voice faltered. Tell me, Maureen said, though tears were already flowing. He dismembered her body and processed it. Processed it? What do you mean? He said, and I'm quoting, he diluted it with the acid he used in processing fish and seafood remains, then mixed it with the rest before disposing of it. The room spun. Maureen gripped the table, sobbing uncontrollably. Her baby girl, her Daisy, not just murdered, but the thought was too horrible to complete. Morrison gave her time, pushing a box of tissues across the table. When she could speak again, Maureen asked the question that had haunted her for 15 years. Why? Why did he do this to us? Morrison flipped to another page. Jealousy. Your seafood stall had become the most popular in the market. You were getting contracts to supply restaurants in bigger cities. Frank's family fishing business, which had operated for 3 generations, lost several major contracts because of your success. He blamed you for his financial ruin and social isolation. But that's just business, Maureen protested weakly. Frank saw it differently. He had no family of his own, no children, no partner. Watching your thriving family while his life crumbled, he wanted to, in his words, even the score. Take from you what you cherished most, since you'd taken everything from him. A terrible realization dawned on Maureen. The gift, the box filled with seafood he gave me. It was his way of flaunting his victory. Frank's stall was failing before my girls disappeared. Then sometime later, after the case went cold, he reopened in my old spot. The spot he always wanted. It became successful, just like mine had been. His plan worked, Morrison said bitterly. He destroyed your family and took your business, but he lost his soul in the process. Now he'll spend what's left of his miserable life in prison. Maureen suddenly remembered. Tommy Caldwell, the fisherman who found the wagon. Someone threw rotten fish in his boathouse today. It was Frank, wasn't it? He had a bald head, drove a blue pickup with a Marine Corps sticker. Frank must have been jealous of Tommy's sudden fame. He even asked me specifically for Tommy's name. Morrison made a note. We'll inform Mr. Caldwell immediately. Thank God we got Frank when we did. Who knows what he might have done next. What about Jesse? Maureen asked. He was terrified, but he came forward. He saved Lila's life. There will be charges for his involvement, Morrison admitted, but the prosecutor will consider his cooperation and how his confession led directly to saving your daughter. Judge will likely be lenient. He closed the file. I think that's enough for now. I'll arrange an escort to take you and Lila to the hospital for her examination. We'll update you on Jesse's situation and any additional evidence we collect. Maureen stood on shaky legs, and Morrison opened the door. In the corridor, she saw Jesse flanked by officers. Despite his obvious fear, he managed a weak smile. "No matter what happens to me, it's going to be all right," he said. "I can live with the consequences. I couldn't have lived with staying silent." Then Moren saw her, Lila, emerging from another interview room. She looked better, more alert after talking with the officers. Their eyes met across the corridor, and suddenly they were moving toward each other. They collided in an embrace that erased 15 years in an instant. Lila might be 23 now, a grown woman who'd endured unimaginable horrors, but in her mother's arms she was 8 again. They held each other as if letting go might mean losing each other once more. "My baby," Moren whispered into Lila's hair. "My sweet girl." "Mom," Lila sobbed, "I thought I'd never see you again. He told us so many lies." Around them, the police station continued its busy work, but for Moren and Lila, the world had shrunk to just the two of them. A mother and daughter, separated by evil, but reunited by the courage of an ordinary man who chose to speak up despite his fear. The police escort arrived, ready to take them to the hospital. As they prepared to leave, Moren looked back at Jessie one more time, nodding her gratitude. Then she turned to her daughter, taking her hand. In a world where darkness could steal children from a sunny park, where evil could hide behind a fisherman's gruff exterior, where 15 years could pass in questions and grief, there was still light. It lived in people like Tommy Caldwell, who remembered old missing person flyers. In Jesse Vaughn, who found the courage to speak despite his terror. In Detective Morrison, who never gave up on 2 missing girls. Most of all, it lived in the love between a mother and daughter, a love that endured 15 years of separation, lies, and loss. Frank had taken so much from them. He'd murdered Daisy, stolen Lila's childhood, destroyed John with grief, and shattered Maureen's life. But he hadn't destroyed that love. As they walked out of the police station into the evening air, Moren held her daughter's hand tightly. They had a long road ahead, healing, justice, learning to be mother and daughter again. But they would walk it together. The story of the Mercer family was one of unimaginable loss and miraculous reunion. It was a reminder that evil could lurk in the most ordinary places, wearing the most familiar faces. But it was also proof that truth, however long buried, had a way of surfacing, sometimes from the depths of Devil's Drop, pulled up in a fisherman's net on an ordinary morning that became anything but ordinary.